April 1, 2006. A 27-year-old medical student walks into a bar in Columbus, Ohio. Security cameras capture him entering at 1:15 a.m. He's never seen leaving. Not on any camera. Not through any exit. Every single door was monitored. Police reviewed hundreds of hours of footage. He simply never came out. Brian Shaffer walked into the Ugly Tuna Saloona and vanished into thin air. 18 years later, nobody knows how he left that building, where he went, or if he's even alive. Welcome back to the Missing Files, where we investigate cases that defy explanation. If you're new here, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because today's mystery is one of the most baffling disappearances in modern American history. What makes Brian Shaffer's case so frustrating is that it should be impossible. We have him on camera entering the bar. We have cameras covering every public exit. We have dozens of witnesses who saw him inside. But we never see him leave. It's as if he walked through a wall or vanished into another dimension. This isn't a case of someone disappearing in a remote wilderness or a vast ocean. This happened in a busy urban area, in a crowded bar, surrounded by hundreds of people and security cameras. Brian Shaffer was a responsible, intelligent person with everything to live for. He was in medical school, had a loving girlfriend, close friends, and a bright future. There was no reason for him to disappear. Yet somehow he did. Brian Randall Shaffer was born on February 25, 1979, in Pickerington, Ohio. He was the younger of two sons in a close-knit family. By all accounts, Brian was an exceptional person, intelligent, friendly, ambitious, and well-liked by everyone who knew him. By 2006, Brian was a second-year medical student at the Ohio State University College of Medicine. He was doing well in his studies and was on track to become a doctor, following in his father's footsteps. His father, Randy Shaffer, was a physician, and Brian greatly admired him. Brian had been dating Alexis, a fellow medical student, for several years. They had a serious relationship and had discussed marriage and their future together. Friends described them as a loving couple who seemed perfect for each other. They had even planned a vacation to Miami for spring break, which was scheduled for just days after Brian disappeared. However, the months before his disappearance had been difficult for Brian. In March 2006, just weeks before he vanished, his mother, Renee Shaffer, died from a rare bone marrow disorder. Brian was devastated. He had been very close to his mother, and her death hit him hard. Friends said he was struggling emotionally and seemed stressed, but he was coping and looking forward to the Miami trip as a way to decompress and heal. On the night of March 31, 2006, Brian decided to go out with friends to celebrate the start of spring break. It was supposed to be a fun night out before his vacation. Nobody could have predicted it would be the last time anyone saw him. On the evening of March 31st, Brian met up with his friend William, Clint Florence. The two decided to bar hop around the campus area of Columbus, a popular activity for students. They started the night around 9 p.m., visiting several bars and having drinks. Around 1:15 a.m. on April 1st, Brian and Clint arrived at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a popular bar located on the second floor of a building near the Ohio State campus. The bar was packed with students celebrating spring break. Music was loud, people were dancing and drinking, and the atmosphere was energetic and crowded. Security cameras at the entrance to the bar captured Brian entering at 1:15 a.m. He was wearing a white button-down shirt, and he looked happy and relaxed. This is the last confirmed footage of Brian Shaffer. Inside the bar, Brian and Clint met up with another friend, Meredith Reed. The three of them spent time together, drinking and socializing. Multiple witnesses saw Brian inside the Ugly Tuna throughout the night. He was talking to people, particularly to two young women near the bar. Witnesses said he seemed to be in good spirits and was flirting and having conversations. Around 1:55 a.m., security cameras captured Brian talking to the two women near the entrance area of the bar. This is the last time Brian Shaffer was ever seen. After this moment, he completely vanished. At approximately 2 a.m., Clint Florence realized he couldn't find Brian. He looked around the bar but didn't see him. Clint assumed Brian had met someone or left with the women he'd been talking to, so he didn't think much of it. Clint and Meredith left the bar around 2 a.m. and went home. Brian never made it home. He never contacted anyone. He simply disappeared. When Brian didn't show up for his scheduled flight to Miami on April 3rd, his girlfriend Alexis became worried. She called his apartment, no answer. She called his friends. Nobody had seen him since that night at the bar. She called his father. Randy Shaffer immediately knew something was wrong. Brian was responsible and would never just vanish without telling anyone, especially with a vacation planned. Randy filed a missing person report with the Columbus Police Department. Detectives immediately began investigating. They started by reviewing security camera footage from the Ugly Tuna Saloona and the surrounding area. Here's what they found, or rather, what they didn't find. Security cameras clearly showed Brian entering the bar at 1:15 a.m. Cameras also showed Clint and Meredith leaving the bar at 2 a.m. But Brian was never seen leaving. The Ugly Tuna Saloona had only one public entrance and exit, and it was covered by cameras. There was a back service entrance for employees, but it led to a locked construction area and was also monitored. There was no footage of Brian exiting through either door. Detectives reviewed every second of footage from that night and the following morning. They watched hundreds of people enter and leave the bar. They accounted for nearly everyone. But Brian Shaffer simply never appeared on camera leaving the building. Police searched the building thoroughly. The Ugly Tuna was on the second floor of a larger complex. Below it were other businesses. Above and around it was a complex layout of hallways, service areas, and construction zones. Detectives searched every inch. They checked bathrooms, storage rooms, construction areas, even the roof. They brought in cadaver dogs. They found nothing. How could someone enter a building, be seen by dozens of witnesses inside, but never be seen leaving? It seemed impossible. But the evidence was clear. Brian went in and never came out. As days turned into weeks, the search for Brian expanded. Police interviewed hundreds of people who were at the Ugly Tuna that night. They spoke to bartenders, patrons, the two women Brian had been talking to, and anyone who might have seen him. Everyone confirmed he was there, but nobody saw him leave or knew where he went. Detectives investigated Brian's personal life extensively. They examined his financial records, no activity after March 31st. His credit cards were never used. His bank account was never accessed. His cell phone went straight to voicemail and was never used again. Police pinged his phone, but the last known location was near the bar, and then it either died or was turned off. They searched his apartment and found everything in order. His car was still parked at his apartment complex. His passport, wallet, and personal belongings were in his room. There was no note, no sign of planned departure, no indication he intended to leave his life behind. Investigators looked into the possibility of foul play. They interviewed everyone Brian knew, looking for anyone with a motive to harm him. They found nothing. Brian had no enemies, no debts, no conflicts. He wasn't involved in anything illegal or dangerous. Everyone described him as a kind, well-adjusted person. They investigated the possibility of suicide, given his mother's recent death. However, Brian had been making plans for the future. He had booked the Miami trip, was scheduled for medical school rotations, and had been talking about his future with Alexis. His family insisted he wasn't suicidal, and there were no warning signs. They considered the possibility of voluntary disappearance. Could Brian have wanted to escape his life? Could the stress of medical school and his mother's death have driven him to start over somewhere new? But again, the evidence didn't support this. He left without money, identification, or any resources to start a new life. And why would he do this right before a vacation he was looking forward to? Police even looked into rumors and strange theories. Some people claimed to have seen Brian after his disappearance, but none of these sightings were confirmed. A psychic contacted police claiming Brian was in the building's walls. Investigators found nothing. Anonymous tips came in, but none led anywhere. As the investigation continued, several strange details emerged that made the case even more puzzling. First, there was the issue of Clint Florence, Brian's friend who was with him that night. Clint initially cooperated with police, but then refused to take a polygraph test. His lawyer advised him not to, which is legally his right, but it raised suspicions among some people, including Brian's father, Randy. Clint maintained he had nothing to do with Brian's disappearance, and that his refusal was simply based on legal advice. He passed away in 2008, taking whatever he knew to his grave. Second, there was the band. A band called the Flaming Moes was playing at the Ugly Tuna that night. Police interviewed band members, and they said they saw Brian in the bar. But tracking down every single person who was in that crowded bar proved difficult. Could someone who was there hold the key to what happened? Third, there's the construction. The building where the Ugly Tuna was located was undergoing renovations at the time. There were construction areas, blocked-off sections, and temporary barriers throughout the building. Could Brian have somehow entered a construction zone and had an accident? Police searched these areas thoroughly, but the building was large and complex. Some theorists believe he could have fallen into a space that was later sealed during construction, though no evidence supports this. Fourth, there's the timeline. Brian was last clearly seen on camera around 1:55 a.m. Clint says he lost track of Brian around 2 a.m. That's a very small window of time. In less than 5 minutes, Brian Shaffer somehow left the bar or disappeared within it, undetected by cameras, friends, or dozens of witnesses. After 18 years, several theories attempt to explain what happened to Brian Shaffer. Theory 1, accidental death in the building. The most logical theory is that Brian somehow died accidentally inside the building complex, and his body was hidden or sealed in a construction area. Perhaps he was intoxicated, wandered into a restricted area, fell, and was injured. His body could have been concealed during construction work. However, extensive searches with cadaver dogs found nothing. The building has been searched multiple times over the years. Unless his body is in a completely sealed space, this seems unlikely. Theory 2, he left through an unmonitored exit. Some believe there was a way out of the building that wasn't covered by cameras. Perhaps a service entrance, emergency exit, or construction passage that police didn't know about, or that wasn't monitored. Brian could have left this way, either voluntarily or taken by someone. The problem is that police extensively mapped the building and monitored all known exits. For this theory to work, there would need to be a completely unknown exit, which seems unlikely in a thoroughly investigated case. Theory 3, foul play by someone he met. Brian was talking to 2 women that night. Could he have left with someone willingly, only to meet with foul play outside the camera's view? Perhaps he was drugged, lured, or convinced to go somewhere that led to his death. This is possible, but police interviewed the women and many others. No one seemed suspicious, and there's no evidence of anyone luring Brian away. Theory 4, voluntary disappearance. Could Brian have staged his own disappearance? Given his mother's recent death and the stress of medical school, could he have wanted to escape his life? Some people pointed to his demeanor in the bar. Perhaps he was saying goodbye. However, disappearing without money, ID, or resources is extremely difficult. And Brian gave no indication to family or friends that he wanted to leave. This theory requires us to believe he abandoned everyone who loved him with no warning or reason. Theory 5, something happened we can't explain. The most frustrating theory is that something occurred that we simply can't explain with the evidence we have. Whether it's an unknown exit, an undiscovered accident, or circumstances we haven't considered, Brian's disappearance defies conventional explanation. Brian Shaffer remains missing. He would be 45 years old today. His case is still open with the Columbus Police Department, and he is listed in national missing persons databases. His father, Randy Shaffer, searched tirelessly for Brian until Randy's death in 2008. He never gave up hope of finding his son, spending his final years investigating, posting flyers, and pleading for information. Brian's girlfriend, Alexis, moved on with her life, but has stated she still thinks about him and hopes for answers. His brother Derek continues to seek information about what happened. The Ugly Tuna Saloona closed in 2013, but the building still stands. People still visit the location, wondering how someone could vanish from such a public place. Brian Shaffer's disappearance is a reminder that sometimes people vanish in the most inexplicable ways. Not in remote forests or vast oceans, but in crowded urban areas with cameras and witnesses everywhere. The question haunts everyone who hears this story: how did he leave that building? What do you think happened to Brian Shaffer? Did he leave through an unknown exit? Is he still in that building? Did someone harm him? Leave your theories in the comments. If you want more investigations into unexplained disappearances, subscribe to the Missing Files and hit that notification bell. Share this video to keep Brian's case alive and help bring answers to his family. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most mysterious disappearances happen in plain sight.